Hello, welcome to my channel. My name's Lizzie. I'm aware that some people, because this is a birth story, will find me who don't normally watch my videos. So yeah, I'm Lizzie. This is my positive birth story of my first child, a little boy, who you'll meet in a minute. But basically, yeah, my thing is I live in North London with my husband and son and fur baby Mabel, and I have recently kind of re-curated my life, I guess, in order to spend more time with my family. Over the last 10 years, I built a design brand that had a bricks and mortar store, and I recently decided to close the store in order to be able to focus on my design work and my podcast and other kind of creative aspirations. So I'm in a really exciting time of life. Stan is actually now about to turn 2, and what I'm going to show you in a minute is a film that I made 3 months after my birth. And interestingly, having filmed it at that time and then watched it back, I didn't feel super confident in the video and what I'd said, or even really the way that I looked, and I ended up not sharing it. A few months after I filmed it, I did write a birth story on my blog that a lot of people have read and said that they found helpful, so I'll link that in the description box. But looking back at the video, I discovered it really recently, not realizing I even still had it, and I think it was still a really accurate and good description of the birth that I had. And looking back at it, and also searching through YouTube, always looking for positive UK birth stories where someone hasn't had to be induced and they haven't had any kind of pain relief. I kind of look for that sort of thing, and there's not that many of them. So I thought it was important that I shared my story, and yeah, watching it back, I think it was a good and accurate explanation of what happened. And I would say it was a positive birth story. That was my experience of it. But actually it was quite complicated, and it was certainly very different from what I was hoping for, I guess. We did hypnobirthing, which I found super helpful. So what I wanted was to give birth in a birthing centre in water. That isn't what happened. I didn't have the normal experience of contractions and realising my labour was coming on. It was quite an unusual situation, but I did find that what I learnt through hypnobirthing massively helped in creating a positive birth story, even though it was quite an unusual one, and possibly some other people who experienced it without that backbone of hypnobirthing might have not thought of it as a positive birth experience. You'll hear more about it and you'll understand as I tell the story. But yeah, I guess that's as much as I need to say now, and I will put you on over to nearly 2 years ago, me explaining my birth story. Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Lizzie. This is my meet the baby / birthing story video. So in a minute I'm going to introduce you to our baby. He's 3 months old now. I gave birth a month early. He was a month premature, so I'll introduce you to him, and then I'm going to tell you about the slightly eventful birth story that we had. So Danny, can I have Stanny? This is Constantin Nelson Evans Gledall. Evans is my surname and Gledall is his daddy's surname. He's named Constantin after a modernist sculptor that we love, and I've always loved the name Constance. For me, being kind of consistent and constant is a really positive thing. And then Nelson after Mandela. He was a month early, as I say. He weighed 3.02 kilos. I think that's 6.6 pounds. And yeah, he's a dream. He's wonderful. We love him very much. He was born with a nice full head of hair, slightly less hair now. But yeah, this is Stan, and he's wonderful. And I'm going to tell you all about how he turned up. You're going to go back to Daddy? You're going to go back to Daddy? If you want to see more Stan spam, it's worth following me on Instagram. I'm at @IFeelSmug. I always say @ which is the handle thing to make it link, but I guess you don't really need the @, it's just I feel smug. And on my stories I quite often have bits and bobs with him. I try to keep the grid not too stanny, but yeah, he's called Constantin. My name's Elizabeth, and I've always loved the fact that different people would call me Betty or Liz or Lizzie or Lizbeth or Elizabeth. So we wanted to choose a name that had that opportunity for lots of different nicknames. So he's Constantin with a C, and we call him Stan most of the time, but also Stanny and Tintin and Connie. And I kind of feel like he might go through a phase as a teenager and just be like Con, and it'd be a bit lame, but he will think it's really cool. So yeah, we're very happy with his name. Stan and Dan is slightly ridiculous. My husband Daniel is called Dan, but yeah, we love it. So birth story wise, let me take a gulp because this is, you know, eventful. I actually was hospitalised with kidney problems. I was out for the day with my mum when I was 8 months pregnant on a Monday, kind of doing a girls' day of like fun stuff to do before the baby comes, and we had had brunch at Noppy, and we had had pedicures at Dry By, and we were off to the Dorchester for afternoon tea, which is like my favourite thing in the world to do. So that kind of illustrates how badly I was in pain. I'd had back pains for several days, and that day it was just getting worse and worse and worse. And basically before we got to the Dorchester, I just had to say, Mum, I can't do it, I'm in too much pain. We were in the West End, so we went to UCLH where I was registered. I had gone in actually once before during this pregnancy because I was concerned about something, and they saw me really quickly and dealt with it really fast and reassured me, and we were out the door within half an hour, maybe 3/4 of an hour, maybe an hour. And so I thought that this would just be a similar experience. It was not. By the time we got there, I mean, I was totally right, I wouldn't have made it to the Dorchester. By the time we got there, I was sort of in a lot of pain, like really doubled over in pain. And it unfortunately took a really long time to be seen. You could kind of see the other women sitting there in the queue almost thinking like, shouldn't you be going before us? And everybody kind of kept getting called up, and you kind of felt like they were almost on the brink of being like, let her go first. Because I was doing my best to firm it, but I was in a lot of pain, and at some points it probably looked a little bit like I was in labour, because I was doubled over, having these waves of pain. Took a long time to be seen. Once eventually I was seen, it kind of felt a bit like they didn't know what to do with me, because it was a back thing, and as far as I could tell, not really connected to my pregnancy, but because I was 8 months pregnant, obviously they wanted to be sure that the baby was okay, and so there's certain procedures you need to go through. I personally have never felt comfortable with speculums, which is a cervical test. I'd had one actually the previous time I'd gone in because I was concerned about something, and I found it very, very painful. And I'd learnt from Kat at Hypnobirthing that quite often it's just something they're ticking off the list, and there's not really a reason they need to do it. It's a bit of a weird one. It's a bit of a hospital doctor thing, like you have to have this, and really there's often not really any reason to. So I was saying to them, look, I don't feel comfortable having that. I'd prefer not to have that. Obviously they checked the baby's heartbeat. They were very confident the baby was fine, but they weren't sure what was wrong with me. But it was almost like I couldn't move further along unless I had a speculum, which was ridiculous. And I was refusing one because I would have had to lie on my back. I was in agony on my back, and that was going to cause even more pain. And I just was feeling like that wasn't what I wanted. Lots of people are perfectly happy with speculums and don't find it painful, but it was something that I didn't feel comfortable with. Anyway, this went on and on and on, didn't really get anywhere, ended up being night time, and they put me on a ward and just attempted to manage my pain. So they were giving me, I think it's called Oromorph or something, it's liquid morphine, so they just syringe it into your mouth. So I was in a bed on a ward with sort of curtains pulled in between. Mum and Dan were both there by that point, and Dan was kind of sleeping overnight in the chair, so we spent the night there. I was just having these waves of pain that were really quite bad. They decided that they thought it was connected with my kidneys. They didn't know if maybe I had a kidney infection or kidney stones. Later they decided it was most likely the baby on the kidneys kind of walloping them and inflaming them, and that was what was causing all of the pain. And with kidney things, it does kind of come in waves in spasms, so it looks quite like you're having a contraction. And obviously I was pregnant, so I was hooked up to a monitor to just check that I wasn't actually having contractions. So I had that regularly, that they were checking that. But basically I was in that sort of a condition for 2 days, 2.5 days of just being given pain medication. It wasn't stopping the pain, unfortunately. I was still in agony. I was literally not able to move or speak, just lay there with my eyes closed. So it wasn't a great situation. Daniel was sort of having to practically carry me to the loo. And as I say, I wasn't feeling like I was getting the care that I needed. Eventually I saw one of the junior doctors. I felt was really good and sensible, and that day, for some reason, for that hour, I felt able to sort of open my eyes and try to look her in the face and talk to her. That day was the day, that second day, that I kind of said to Mum and Dan, like, what are we going to do? Like, I can't just be on this pain medication for a month and then have a cesarean. I can't do this for a whole month, and there's no way I could give birth in this condition. So what are we going to do? And we decided we wanted to talk to that doctor that I had really liked. And she sort of got it and saw that we needed to do something else. She had been pushing for me to see a kidney specialist, which unfortunately never happened. I had by that point had a what's it called? It's like a scan, so a sonographer checking, but actually my back, and they said that my kidneys were very inflamed, but they were inflamed at the same rate, and if it had been a kidney stone, one would be bigger than the other. So at that point they said the most likely thing is it is the baby walloping them. So they wanted me to be up and around and moving around to try and get the baby to move position, but unfortunately the Oromov makes you really drowsy and nauseous, and I wasn't able to walk. And I was in so much pain I wasn't able to walk, but they were trying to dial back the pain medication so I could be up and about. We were in this catch-22. But with the doctor I was just like, this is, I should have said actually, birth stories, TMI. So if this isn't your cup of tea, you've met the baby, maybe bounce, come back next week, because some of this is going to be a bit gross. Sorry about that. I didn't see myself as someone who would record a birth story necessarily, but when I was pregnant I found watching other people's really helpful, so I'm jumping on the bandwagon. And there's a couple of things I feel like no one told me that people need to know, and this is one of them. I basically said to her, these waves of pain that I'm getting in my kidneys have now got to the stage that it's in my bottom as well, so I was getting this really, really strong, sharp pain in my bum. I mean, I'm loath to say sphincter on YouTube, but basically that's what was happening in my sphincter. Yeah, so I said that to her. She wanted to give me something to help me go to the loo, so they gave me something to help me go to the loo. An hour or so later, Daniel kind of helped me to go to this disabled loo that was very near my bed, and at that point I was really experiencing crazy waves of pain. And I thought that it was I needed to go to the toilet. So Dan and I went into this loo. I basically said to him, look, this is just you and me, like I don't want any nurses or anyone coming and helping or disturbing us. I just need to get through this. I just really have to go to the loo. He did pop out just to tell my mum that I was okay, because I was like wailing in pain, which was all a bit dramatic. He says we were in there for 2 hours, but when he popped out to see my mum, I was 99% sure my waters broke, so this gush of kind of water went liquid when I was on the loo. But I didn't have the strength to really speak. I didn't tell him I thought my waters had broke, partly because I didn't have the strength to really speak, but also I didn't want really the doctors to know, because I was aware of the fact that after 24 hours, if your waters had broken, you were induced. I really didn't want to be induced, and I knew I was safe, I knew I was in a hospital, so I decided not to mention it at that stage. Just wanted to be left alone, basically to try and do a poo. So Dan and I were in there for 2 hours with these waves of kind of pain, of me yelling out, just really trying to go to the loo, sorry, TMI. Eventually, once I was at a stage that I felt like I could go back to my bed, we went back to my bed, and obviously at that stage they wanted to keep checking to see if I was in labour, because it sounded at that stage like I was in labour. They actually did put the tapes around me and checked, and they were not 100% sure, but they were like, okay, we think maybe you are having contractions now, but they didn't seem definite. Again with the whole speculum thing, and I was basically writhing in pain on this bed, and I was just like, just leave me alone, there's no way you're not coming anywhere near me. And they were just like, we have to do a speculum. And I was like, look, please just like give me some time to try and pass this and sort myself out, and then we'll talk about it. They were quite pushy. My mum in the end was just like, look, she said not now, she's not said never, leave us alone. So they did leave us alone, luckily, for a little bit, and I kind of got to the stage that I could cope with the idea of going downstairs and being moved. I was really in a lot of agony, and when your kind of trolley bed gets moved and you get pushed through all the doors and like you feel really nauseous, and it's not a nice experience. So I just wanted to be left for a minute to be ready. When they came back and they checked me again, they were a bit concerned about the baby's heart rate. So at that stage I was like, of course, let's just go, we're going, let's do this. And yeah, we went down to the labour ward, and at that stage I did obviously get checked, and they were like, you're at 10 centimetres, let's go, let's push, we're ready to rumble. So in hindsight, that time on the loo where I felt like I was needing to go to the toilet and was basically very seriously constipated from the Oromorph makes you very constipated too. So and I was a month early, so I didn't know that I was going to labour. They didn't know I was going into labour. In hindsight, what I need to tell you, TMI, butt contractions, that's a thing. So because the baby was back to back and coming down the birth canal and putting pressure on my bottom, I was experiencing my contractions in my bum, not in the normal place. So I had 2 hours of butt contractions. Hopefully that won't happen to you. It's agony, but that is a thing. And I think it's important to know it's a thing, because I had learnt various breathing techniques and different things that I was going to do when I was experiencing my contractions. I didn't know I was in labour. I thought some whole weird bum thing was going on. So I didn't use those tools. And so I think it's really important to know that that is a possibility, because once I was aware of being in labour and ready to push, I coped with it really, really well. I would go so far as to say I enjoyed giving birth at that point. But because I didn't know I was in labour earlier, and it was a very different experience from most people have, I imagine, unless everyone has butt contractions and you're not telling us, I didn't know, and so I didn't use my tools to help me through it, which was a shame. I'd note for next time. But yeah, once I was downstairs in the labour ward, in the room that I was going to give birth in, I was surrounded by this amazing team of midwives. One of them was called Constance, which was really nice. We already had in the back of our minds that we liked the name Constantin, so that was cool. But yeah, these women were epic. They were really cheering me on. They were just like, okay, you're at 10 centimetres, we're going to push. And so that's what we did. And I actually found it really natural that when the contraction came, that kind of wave over you and you just push with it. And I would go so far as to say that I enjoyed it. I was holding on to Danny's hands. I had my mum praying in the corner. I was listening to an MP3 of Katrina Berry, who is our hypnobirthing teacher, on repeat, listening to that. And I was just totally in the zone. And I loved it. I loved it. Kidney pains, I did not love. That was horrific. But the pushing part of giving birth lasted an hour, and I loved it. Because he was premature, and because they were a bit worried about his heart rate, the last bit they did give me an episiotomy little snip, which wasn't much fun, and they did need to pull him out with forceps, because by that point they just wanted to get him out. I almost managed it by myself. When he was crowning and they could see his head, they were like, oh, he's got a full head of hair, which was really good motivation to kind of keep going. It's like, I really want to meet him, and I kind of always wanted a baby with lots of hair. I was born with a full head of hair. We knew he was going to be a boy already, but I was really excited to meet him at that stage. And even though I'd done an hour of pushing, which actually isn't very long compared to lots of other people, of course, but it is quite intense, I was just like, that last bit, come on, but they had to pull him out. What was quite interesting is, with our hypnobirthing, I learnt a lot about the best positions to give birth in, and it's funny that I ended up on my back with my feet in stirrups, which is exactly the opposite of what I thought that would happen and what I would choose. There were stages, I started on my back and did pushing. There were stages where I said, is it okay if I turn over and like kneel and hold on to the back of the bed to push? Because I feel like that's a more natural position, and we tried that for a bit and it worked for a bit, but really maybe it was the baby being back to back. What ended up working for us was me being on my back with my legs in the air. They were grabbing my legs and kind of pushing them so that my knees were bent. They were brilliant, those women. They really smashed it. They really helped me, and they made me feel like I was doing a really good job. So that was an amazing support, and having Mum and Dan in the room was amazing. And then yeah, out he came. They popped him on my chest for a bit. Because he was premature, he had to go off into special care, so we didn't get to have him very long, unfortunately. I didn't get that experience of breastfeeding him for the first time. He needed to be taken away. There was actually, Dan was saying, it was really interesting through the experience seeing these waves of people coming in and out, and when you knew it was really happening, it was because there was like 10 people in the room, doctors and nurses and midwives all there. That showed it was kind of serious and this is really kicking off. And one of those people were responsible for his care and his aftercare, so she took him off and he was in the not intensive care but special care ward and had to be fed formula through a tube. So it's a bit of a shame to not get to have him with us at that stage, but I'm going to do a separate video about my breastfeeding story because that kind of needs a whole other video, because there are various hiccups and things going on with that. I think not enough people say, because I've discussed this with other people and it seems quite common, that it takes sort of sometimes 8 to 10 weeks to really get your supply right and things working, and we had quite a lot of hiccups from the formula and then my breast milk not coming in because he wasn't with me. So that's going to be a whole other video which will maybe be next week or the week after, so I'll focus on that another time. But yeah, he was in his own care unit, and after I'd been sewn up and we'd been given our bed upstairs, eventually we could go down and see him. He was really quite jaundiced, so he had to be in an incubator that had a blue light which helped with his jaundice, and that was why he had to stay downstairs for a while. He couldn't be with us on our ward, but eventually we got to have him. He had to have this blue light stuck up his top. It's called a billy blanket that glows, again to help with the jaundice. I think the thing that I found hardest actually about the whole thing was the fact that when he got checked for jaundice, they had to kind of prick his heels every time with like this little staple sounding thing that kind of made him bleed, so they could check his levels of stuff, whatever that was. So I found that quite hard, and actually once we got home, I for the first few nights I had really weird dreams of people cutting little scalpel holes all over me, and I think that must have been what that was from. So that was quite hard, but he was fine. So yeah, we spent another 7 days in hospital, most of them with us, most of them with him with us, but he wasn't discharged for quite a long time. So there are a few little bits of advice that I would say. I mean, most people probably won't have that experience. You won't be in hospital that long, but we do have friends who were in hospital for 3 weeks with their baby. So I would just say a few things for a long stay kind of in hospital, having given birth. One of them is the fact that the midwives were wonderful and they took really good care of us, but they do daytime and nighttime shifts. And if you're there for several days, you will meet a lot of different midwives, and they all will have very strong feelings about how you should be looking after your baby and learning how to look after your baby. Again, a lot of it's to do with breastfeeding, and I will talk about that in the breastfeeding video, but it can be frustrating because they can contradict each other. They all have their different views, and obviously we know these sorts of areas, people have very strong views and conflicting views, and as a new parent, as an exhausted new parent, it can be quite frustrating if you get told to do it one way and then on the night shift they're like, that's not what you should be doing, this isn't what you should be doing, you should be doing this. So I would say, even though you're a complete novice and you don't know what you're doing, you do know what's best for your baby. You are their parent and you know what's best for your baby. So if you can take in all of the information you're given and educate yourself as much as possible, but then make decisions of what's right for you and try not to get thrown off too much by these different counterbalancing views. Also, you will have continuity to a certain extent if you're there for a few days. So Wendy was the midwife that we thought was completely wonderful, and we would ask for her when she was in, and we would know the days that she was going to come back in, and she was the person actually who made it possible for Stan to get discharged and for us to go home. We probably would have been there for another 2 weeks if it wasn't for her connecting the dots that even though we live in Hackney, we have an Islington GP, and Islington has an amazing service called Hospital at Home, where midwives come out and take care of babies and children up to teenagers at home with various conditions and diseases, and that meant we could be at home, and they came and checked us here. So that was a really special thing. Another piece of advice if you're there for a long time is find a chance to leave the hospital. I became quite institutionalized, and I hadn't realized that at day 7 I basically realized I hadn't left the building, I hadn't been outside, hadn't breathed fresh air, and I actually suffer a bit from claustrophobia, so that was quite a hard thing. And on that day when I realized that, Dan really encouraged me to just go downstairs and like stand in the doorway and get some fresh air. And that was a big deal for me because I was still in quite a lot of pain, having been like sewn up and, you know, given birth is a big deal. But I went outside and I basically cried, really. Happiness, but I was really overwhelmed because I realised we get to take the baby home. There's a whole outside world. It's not like I had accepted and understood that we had a baby, but we'd been inside for it so long and in the hospital. I hadn't quite got to the stage that I realised we were going to get to take him home and he would be a real part of our lives, and all of our friends and family would meet him and he would be ours without the hospital. So that was really important for me. Other silly little things are things like the menu for the day comes in the morning with your breakfast, and if you don't fill in the form quickly you get in a lot of trouble. So don't just sit and eat your breakfast and rest on your laurels, fill that form in. I've never eaten so much jelly in my life, but because I'd been so ill beforehand, I basically hadn't eaten for 2-3 days, so I was having to like gradually like eat bits of salad and then have some jelly and then gradually build it up. The other thing I would say is actually, if you're doing a long stay, UCLH is a great hospital to be in because you can send mum or Dan out for Pret or whatever else that you want. You don't have to only have hospital food. So it's a good location for that sort of thing. What else did I want to talk to you about? We actually, towards the end, mum came in and sat with him for a couple of hours so Dan and I could go and have a meal together and sort of have a moment together. He was amazing and was sleeping on the floor every night. I think he had one night at home because his back started getting quite bad, and mum took over that night and slept in the chair, but he was a real trooper. It's not easy for dads if you're staying in for a long time because they don't even get bed. So that was quite full on. But it was really important to go and have that moment together. We'd set it up so we'd have 2 hours of mum looking after the baby and I'd be back again to breastfeed in time. But actually we were back within an hour and we had a lovely time together, but we sort of just wanted to get back to the baby. So yeah, the other thing I would say is when you get back from the hospital, the next day the health visitor comes. Because we're on this silly boundary of Hackney and Islington, actually we managed to get 3 hospitals worth of health visitors all arrive at the same time. So that was pretty overwhelming. I think a lot of people actually have the experience when they leave the hospital because they haven't stayed for a long time. Oh my goodness, you're letting us leave with this baby. We don't know what we're doing. Whereas actually we were really ready to leave. We'd been there a long time. We'd had a lot of help and preparation for what it was going to be like when we got home, and we just desperately wanted to get home. So to us it was a bit overwhelming to be home and then suddenly have this big group of people turn up in the living room and want stuff from us. And luckily I had kept a log of all of his feedings and what his nappies were like and stuff, so it was good to be in a position to be able to really clearly answer questions to the health visitor. So I would recommend writing stuff down because there's stuff they want to know that's really hard when you're knackered to remember, so, and it's all a bit of a haze. So that was really good to write that down, and actually still to this day we write down when he eats, which is helping us work out stuff, but that will be another video. I might do a 0 to 3 month kind of what we've learned and how it works. Yeah, I kind of feel like I've covered quite a lot. Sorry about that. Typically me, the memory card ran out. But yeah, just to recap, it was not the home or birth centre in water birth that we were preparing for, but we found hypnobirthing really, really helpful. I found my mum and Daniel amazing and the midwives. So yeah, if you have any questions, then just leave them in the comments below and I will answer them. But it was really wonderful in the end, and we're very happy to be first-time parents. It's quite a crazy experience, and I will keep you updated on how everything's going. But basically that's our birth story. That's how Stan chose to come into the world, and it worked for us. We'll see what the next one's like. I was going to say, I don't know if we'll have a next one. Hopefully there'll be no butt contractions. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and let me know if you have any questions. As I say, if you want to see our little journey as a family more regularly, then check us out on Instagram. But otherwise I will see you again for another video. If you fancy subscribing or giving this video a thumbs up, that would be lovely. I will put this video in a playlist of all of the pregnancy and birth and baby related videos, but I will be starting to upload on Mondays some kind of home, how to curate your home type videos and doing tours of the home and maybe some more smug and shop stuff, but I will continue on with some baby bits too. I feel like I've been watching tons of sleep training videos recently, so maybe when we're at that stage we'll record some things like that too. But any ideas of things that you would like to see, again, just leave a comment below. But thank you so much for watching. If you're pregnant, I hope you're doing really well. Be kind to yourself, take care of yourself. If you're new parents, same. If you can find any time to look after yourselves and each other, do. But I would say that everything is just a phase and it all happens so quickly and it's all on to the next thing so fast. Try not to get kind of too stuck in a rut. But yeah, it's exhausting, but it's wonderful. Lots of love. Take care. Bye. So yeah, that's it really. Cut back to now. I think the things that I would have talked more about hypnobirthing if I'd recorded it now, because I think at the time I mean I touched upon hypnobirthing at the beginning of this video, but I felt at the time that I didn't have the opportunity to use the tools that I had learnt because I didn't know I was in labour. But actually, as I mentioned at the top of the video, I feel like what we had learnt in the affirmations that I'd been doing and the MP3s I'd been listening to and just the education that you get from hypnobirthing was massively beneficial to it feeling like a positive birth experience, and it really did feel like a good experience even though it was quite complex. So yeah, if you don't know much about hypnobirthing and you're pregnant now, I would massively recommend it. We decided to pay to do a hypnobirthing course in person rather than taking NCT. I know that other people do online courses, but basically I was put off hypnobirthing at first because of the hypno and it sounded really woo-woo. For me, it was actually just being really educated on what your body is naturally going through and the stages of labour and birth and the best possible things that you can do to get your body ready for it and helping your body through labour. There were people on our course who wanted to have cesareans. It doesn't mean that it has to be some supernatural birth. That is what I wanted, but it is a mindset thing, and the breathing techniques are useful just for life in general, but you learn so much more. So big shout out to hypnobirthing. I'm going to quickly record Stan for a minute for you. He's in the other room playing with his dad because I just think it's quite fun to see him now almost 2 years later, so I'll show you. Hey Babs, you playing Duplo?
You showing Mummy the trucks?
He's gone quiet.
You showing Mummy the trucks?
This is Stan now. He's nearly 2, aren't you? And he's normally very chatty, but he's being camera shy. But anyway, yeah, I'd massively recommend hypnobirthing. We felt like UCLH did a really good job looking after us in the end. And yeah, this is Stan. This is the result of the hard labouring. But thanks for watching. Speak soon.